My full name is Anthony Hernandez Wallen, January 17th, 1951, 66. My great-grandmother gave me the name Anthony because we're raised Roman Catholics. So the day I was registered, I was registered on the 18th, and the patron saint of that day was Saint Anthony. So I was given the name Anthony. Our family name is Hernandez, and that was from my great-great-grandmother. They also named me Anthony under Antonia. My great-great-grandmother's name was Antonia Hernandez, so they gave me the name Anthony to preserve that memory. So I carry that, and I was born Anthony Hernandez. I took up Wallen when I came to the U.S., and my uncle adopted me. So he raised me from the time I was 9 years old till I was, a full-grown person. So I decided to honor him to carry his name as well, which is our grandfather, whose name was Wallen. So that's how I ended up with Hernandez Wallen, hyphenated. I was born in Heights of Guanapo, which is a suburb of Arima, which is the third largest city in Trinidad. I was born on our ancestral estate, which is the name Antonio Hernandez. If you look at the records, the name is on the deed, and it's on miners' property. The day I was born, they shot a big deer. And it was a rough time for us. My father had died just before I was born, and I was born an orphan. There was almost nothing in the house. And my uncle, who is half Spanish, half Caribbean, authentic Caribbean, he walked just maybe a short distance from the house, and they shot the biggest deer. And they were able to take that deer. My uncle, who was my mother's brother, took that deer and was able to sell that. And he was able to buy groceries and powdered milk and so forth for me. So it brought a blessing. The deer gave its life so that I could have life. That deer skin stayed on our bed head till I was about 25, 24. It was still up there in an old home. So, oh yes, my great-grandmother gave me the name Clanny. And that's what most people know me by, that name. I have not heard that name anywhere on planet Earth, but my great-grandmother told me it was named after a Frenchman. Because at our time when I was born in the 50s, it was the era just after World War II. So cocoa estates, which were run by the French Creole, the Spaniards had gone a long tradition, most Frenchmen ran the estates. So therefore, there was a heavy French influence in that. In the lingua franca at that time in Trinidad for people on the cocoa estates was patois or French Creole. So we spoke a distinct and different from Haiti. My earliest childhood memory, I was probably around, I would say maybe 18 months old. I remember sitting on my great-grandmother's lap and her feeding me with formula or milk, and you had the regular nipple that you used to put on a bottle, and it was a soda pop bottle, glass bottle, and I was on her lap. And that's my earliest childhood memory. I remember sitting on the ground in water, little kids on the ground in water, lapping up in water. I also remember when I was about 3 years old for Parang, which is Christmas, because being Hispanic, we have a tradition of Parang music, which is only known outside of Seville, Spain. It's the only country Trinidad has that treasure of serenading you for Christmas in Spanish. And I was being carried from our home through the mountain because there was no roads back, just a mountain path, on my other uncle's shoulder with a flambeau, which is like a Molotov, or if we call it flambeau, you'd call it a Molotov cocktail. She uses light to go through the forest. I also remember my mother, when we went to my great-grandfather's home, who was out across the river, Aripo Mountain. We were there, and we were all sleeping on the floor, and she got up in a light green slip, like a undergarment, light green. I remember that. I was probably around maybe 2 years old at the time. The other frightening thing I remember is when they were burying we had a donkey. My great grandfather had a donkey. He used to call it Moto Jim. And they were burying the donkey, and they told me they're going to bury me with the donkey. To this very day, scared. I was crying all day. And they're going to bury me with Moto Jim. So I remember those things. And, in our days, I didn't play a lot. We used to fly kites, maybe marbles, just a little. But most of my youth, from the time I was 5 years old, I was babysitting my eldest brother, because I was the first child, and my second brother. He was at the age of 5. I was babysitting him. Then after him came my other brother. I was babysitting him. Then who was Davis? I babysitted him. Then my aunt, who gave birth to her son, I ended up babysitting him. So I went from my first brother, my second brother, and then my cousin. Then my uncle, who raised me, took me to him, and I was babysitting his first child, Susan, which is my cousin, and then Tex. So my entire youth was spent just babysitting and chores. And one of the facts that I didn't have a father, I always knew from since I was a child that if I lived somewhere, it's at somebody else's pleasure. So I always had to earn my keep, so I was very disciplined that way. And that's the reason why to this very day, I tell them, having a home to me was important. As giving my family the best home they can get is something I always cherished. And from that is what made me that way. In our family, we had 7 children. My mother had 7, 4 boys, 3 girls. My third brother, my mother's third child, David, he died in New Hampshire. He was like about 30 years old when he died. He died of hepatitis. He just collapsed and died. He had one son who was 2 years old at this time. His son died also as well. They had sickle cell anemia. So they both died the same way. Fell in the bathroom, rushed to hospital dead. His son fell in the bathroom. He died just as in the hospital dead the same way. Mark, David, dead. June, Joanne, Jenny, and our last baby of the family is Terrence. I didn't have too many friends. Because, for example, when I was in Brazil Village, I was around 5 years old. A good friend of mine, his name was Jeffrey. My next door neighbor, his name was Jeffrey. He was a good friend of mine, so we played a lot. When I was in my teenage years, I was just, for the most part, as in school. I mean, I went to school and went home and babysat, and I did that. I always had things to do. I didn't have much time to play. There wasn't much time to play. Okay, we were directly across from Mount Sierra de Aripo, which is, you could look from, we were approximately west of the tallest mountain in Trinidad. There's a valley, and we were at the top of the other mountain. So you could look at the tallest mountain in Trinidad directly across from us. Behind that mountain, on the foot of the other side of the eastern part of the mountain, almost all our relatives lived there. To this very day, they still live there. And that was cut off during World War II. And so everybody that lived in where I live, in our village, in Haisakonapo village, had to move after World War II because there was no school. They built a school in Aripo village, so therefore the village is there to this very day. But for us who lived on the other side of the Aripo, there was no school, so we had to come to Arima to go to school. So you used to have a house in the country and a house in Arima to send your kids. And the village died eventually. We were the last remaining family in Haisakonapo village that stayed there continuously. And I left there around the age of 5 to go to school in Arima. And from there I went to Brazil village with my mom, lived there for a little while, went to Roman Catholic school, Brazil Roman Catholic school. And from there was back to Malabar and Arima. And from Malabar, Lashan Straits, we came to the bypass road in Arima. From the bypass road, I got married. I got married there. Lived with my mother-in-law in Larry Tret Road, which is close to Haisakonapo as well. From there, I went to San Juan. I lived there for about a year. And I came to Canada, lived there for 6 months. in Hamilton and Montreal. Then from there, I came to Dorchester, Massachusetts. I lived there for 2 years. She was born there. My eldest daughter was born there in 1976. And I didn't like how she was living, so I went to New Hampshire. We lived in Derry, New Hampshire from 1977 till 1990. The oldest person I met when I was young, my great-grandmother. Yep. I could describe her. She was Spanish, and I didn't realize, I just come to realize only recently, I think she was Jewish, because the last name Hernandez is actually a Jewish name from part of Spain. The reason why I say she was Jewish, because she had a name called Migalit. That was her given name as a child. So we always know her as Nen Migalit or Auntie Migalit. And I come to find out that Migalit is actually a Jewish name. So the name Hernandez and the part of Spain, they left Venezuela to come to Trinidad because they were persecuted in Venezuela. And they had to come to Trinidad to live. Lots of people from Venezuela came to Trinidad to live after the Civil War in Venezuela. So we get to find her because she had blue eyes. She was blue eyes, black hair, very light skin, red cheek, and she was very well educated. And till she lived to close to, I think, 100 or 101, and she only was in hospital for 3 or 4 days and then died. Full senses, and she used to go up that mountain road, up in the mountains up there, and lived there and that's what kept her alive for all these years. And I just came to find out alkaline water keeps you alive. But mountain water, right, is in the mountains is always at a pH of 9, right, 9% pH. And if you were to bathe with that and drink the water, it balances all the acidity in your body. And it's now been proven fact that alkaline water now, it balances everything in your body, so you don't get sick at all. Cancer, whatever, yes. So we know for a fact because we used to drink either rainwater or the water from the mountain springs, the mountain streams. Also, we used to eat all your bacon, eggs, and all that in the morning, and nobody ever got cholesterol, nobody got sick, nobody ever got high blood pressure, nobody ever went to the hospital. She never went to a doctor in her entire life until 3 days before she died. I would say Mary Had a Little Lamb was one of those songs you remember from small. And being raised Spanish, the first song you remember is your parang song, which is Sereno, 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 Será, right? Then you remember Calypso, which was Jonah Yatifa Baker, well, one gone. And that was something we had on a gramophone. When I was about 6 years old, there was a gramophone because we didn't have radio at home at that time, so, but that was on a gramophone by some, but that was the Calypso, I remember, first song I think I remember. Gramophone was something you spin a record and you have to wind it up, and then you put this big fat needle on top of it, and then you had this big loud thing. If you ever see his master's voice, I think his RCA record has as the mascot the dog sit with the lady. Well, that's a gramophone, and to have one of those back in the day was only the privileged few had those. Men slicking their hairs. Black guys would slick their hair. The potato slick, and I guess they take potato and slick the hair, make it straight. That was a big fad. And bell-bottom pants, that was a big fad when I was growing up. Well, I went to my school system. I went to private school. From Hassaquanapa, when we moved to Arima at around 4 years old, I was sent to private school. And I went to Mrs. Forbin's school. It was the house behind us. And my memory of that school, in there, I was 4 years old, and she was making flour dumplings in a soup. And I vividly remember I was so hungry looking at making that soup in the pot. That's all I remember of that school she's making. We couldn't get any because it was a private home. But I remember, to this very day, I remember that. Her rolling with her two hands, making those dumplings, dropping in the pot. To fast forward from there, I went to Arima Hindu school because the school by the Hindu religion, they had a private school. And from there, I went to Catholic school. I went to Catholic school till I went to high school. Till 11 years, went to high school, to Hines High School in Trinidad. And that was the last school I went to, yes. And at fifth standard, the teacher had the most indelible impression on my mind was a teacher by the name of Gerard David. Gerard David used to read literature at lunchtime. So we did Wuthering Heights, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, Robinson Crusoe, and we did classical works. And we also did classical music. River flowing, thy waters blue, so cool, so clear. We used to sing those. So he exposed us to the classical literature, classical music, and also to this very day, all the education I ever got, I was in fifth standard, which is about 11 years old. Everything you see I have done to this very day, I learned in that class. I mean, I learned mathematics, arithmetic, literature, to write, and he taught me to read, make me have a love for reading because he used to read books. And because we didn't have television, or very few people had radio, so every lunchtime we'd come back in after lunch at 1 o'clock, and from 1 to 2 we'd read a chapter in a book, and it was like it was our soap opera, and that created a great love for reading. It is because of my love for reading I educated myself. So I travel around the globe, and people would ask me, did you graduate from Oxford or Harvard? I said, no, fifth standard in Trinidad. But, I went to high school, but all my basic education, because I love to read, and I educated myself because of that program in the school with Gerard David. So he has left an indelible impression upon my mind to this very day. And I thank him for everything I know today. It's because of him. And that's almost 60 years ago. That was Arima Boys RC, which Boys RC means Arima Roman Catholic School. So in the borough of Arima, we had the Roman Catholic Church, and they ran the Boys RC school. My grandfather was christened and confirmed at the Roman Catholic Church. So was my grandmother, my great-grandfather, they attended the Roman Catholic school. So my mother, christened and confirmed at the same Catholic church. I was christened, confirmed, made first communion, and married in 1971 at the very same Catholic church. So we go back, Catholicism is a long history. However, the very first school I went to was a Arima Hindu school in Arima. I went there for like about a year. And interesting, used to go the resident sadhu, which was the holy man who prepared the temple. He used to go, and not the pundit. We used to go every morning. He used to give us little sweet little fried dough in sugar. So we went to school early to get that in the morning. And I forgot to tell you, my very first song also was a Hindu hymn. Jai Jai Krishna Hare, Siddhi Krishna Hare, Duki Duki. That was the hymn we had to sing in the morning. So that is also a famous Hindu chant and a Hindu prayer. So that was one of the first songs I remember. As we talk, I remember that. So from there, I went back to Roman Catholic school, where you go to catechism classes and so forth. I love to read. I just love to read. That was my favorite subject, composition and reading. I did okay. I did fairly well. I wasn't the brightest kid in the class. I did good. And that teacher, Mr. Gerard David, we have what you call tests in Trinidad. So every year you would have a test. And if you have a class of 36, classes were 36 to 50 kids. It was normal. And you would have first, second, third, right, in class. So you'd have an exam, write an exam, and at the end you'd be graded. You'd be first in test, meaning if all the kids in the class, you made the highest scores. And the second highest score, second, and then third. So it was a big thing to be first, second, or third. I had very poor grades, and when Gerard David finished whipping me, because we had whipping in school, I got fifth. I went fifth, and he gave me, for the most improved student, I got a book, Last of the Mohicans. I've lost that book not too long. I had it up to many, many years. I lost it, I think, in Boston. But that book I got for Last of the Mohicans, it was the most memorable thing I got in school because it improved my grade. And after I went to high school, graduated from high school, normal, then I came to the US shortly after that. But it was nothing spectacular. Because I didn't have, at that time, it wasn't like, no, you had to pay for education, high school. You get only so much. And after that, there was nothing, no support. Then my uncle left to come to the United States. So he was the chief, he's the guy that raised me. So in 1968, he came to the United States. So there was nothing to go and nothing to fall back because I had to go to work right then and there. And I've been working ever since. Very nice guy, funny guy, and that was about it. I was always trying to do something in business as long as I can remember. They say I was always thinking of some way to make money or business. I was always thinking outside the box. You do this or raise chickens, raise goats. So I was always trying to do something to be in business because I know from a very young age that you had to make money. And my father was dead, and I always knew that. So I had this inner instinct to earn money or do a business, and it's been with me all my life. For the most part, I really had nothing specific in mind. I didn't say I wanted to be a doctor or lawyer. I just wanted, my main focus when I was growing up was to be in business. I always wanted to do that. And only thing I could remember when I took my very first job, I went into the security business. The very first job I had was a security officer. And I said, well, I would like to be a policeman. But by the time I was getting ready to go into that, I left for the US. So after that, I was an illegal alien for 15 years in the United States. So you had to work at what you get. And I lived very, very well during that time. I was fortunate enough. And nobody ever asked me one day if I had a green card. And I had a driver's license, drive out houses. We lived an upper middle class life just by sheer working hard. Always doing, again, entrepreneurial spirit, doing things on the side. When I came to North America, I went to Canada. And the very first job I had is a Wang Wing food company. They're still in Montreal today. They package Chinese food and they distribute in cans and so forth. And the very first job they gave me was a pickaxe to chip ice on a ramp. It was 4 inches of ice on the ramp. So I just come from Trinidad with a pickaxe and I was taking 4 inches snow, but I wanted a job, so I did that for about 3 months. And then I went to Hamilton, Ontario, where I worked in a salvage yard where they have steel come in and the steel has to be cut into pieces and loaded on barges to take to smelting plants and for export. And a Russian Jewish guy by the name of Pete taught me to use a cutting torch. I have a scar on my hand to this very day right here where hot steel fell inside my gloves and burnt my hands. And on that job, I was such a good worker on that particular job that they were giving raises and they promised us a raise, the whole crew. And I was the only guy that actually got a raise. So when we got paid, I opened up my envelope. I said, I got the raise, we got the raise. They didn't give nobody else the raise. The other guys were furious. And from that day to this very day, I don't ever expose my paycheck envelope to anybody because it may cause problems. But that was a job. And I have done, everywhere I've went after that, every job I've taken to this very day, they always ask me to come back. I always left. I was never fired from any job in my life. No, and I'll tell you the reason why. Because it put a roof over your head. And if a job puts a roof over your head, I don't care how distasteful, to me it was great because, I was able to feed my family, keep a roof over my head. So I know from the time I was 18 years old. As a matter of fact, the very first job I ever did to get paid was I worked for $3. I worked all day planting. Somebody had this luxury home in Christina Gardens in Arima. There's this fabulous home, and they had me, the contractor had me plant grass. There were grass clippings that you planted over this big area. I got $3. It was so much money, I gave it to my uncle because I didn't know what to do. $3 was a lot of money. I had it to him. I was confused with all that money. Oh, at 62, I was collecting Social Security and a pension from FedEx. But I'm here I'm not retired right now. I'm actively engaged in three or four businesses, still trying to get them off the ground. And I don't think I'll ever retire. I had my own trucking company. I was working as a subcontractor for when Sprint started in the 90s, 2000, 2004, 2003. Sprint started erecting cell towers all over the Southeast, and I was a subcontractor for them. So I would take off all the cables, the computers, cables, and antenna pods that you see on roofs all over the place right now, those little pods. So when a cell site was done, my job was to deliver that to that site. And I had to go in swamps, mountains, rivers, wherever, and you had to be at a particular time. And one week I made $10,000. And you get to work Monday to Friday, and I was building a restaurant, building a house, building 3 houses, which are still in Pine Lake today. Those buildings are still in Pine Lake today. I don't own them, but they're still there. That was the most satisfying and enjoyable job I've ever had in all my life. All the jobs, I enjoyed every other job, but that to me was the most rewarding because it allowed me to finally to spread your wings and do things you always wanted to do. Well, when the very first job I had after I came from Canada to America, because I only spent 6 months in Canada, and I came to the United States, I used to work for Barry Controls. I was working in the shipping as a receiver. So I was working next to the guy, I was the shipper. So the shipper and receiver department were at the front of the building. And I used to have to ship out packages every evening. So the guys would come with the trucks, and when they come with these trucks, I was giving them these 1 pound packages, and they were making $6 to take a package from Woburn, Massachusetts to Logan Airport. And I said, if I have a little truck, I can make a little extra money. And I went to traffic management school. I graduated in traffic management and going part-time. So when I graduated with that, I got a job with Roger DeFeo, Italian guy, at Logan Airport. And he taught me to rate bills. And by rating bills, I was able to learn about the business of bringing stuff. That's how I got involved with packages. And I started my own little business. I quit my regular job to work on my own from Barry Controls in Woburn. Struck out my own little trucking business. And from the trucking business, I used to work for Dave's Motor Freight at Logan Airport in Boston. And working for them, I quit after a while and worked for Johnny De Jesus Food Master, delivering groceries in a predominantly Portuguese neighborhood. And that was another rewarding experience in my life because we never lost an order. And I had people, those old Portuguese women used to leave their homes open. And for me to come and drop off ice, I had my tip, a drink in the refrigerator. And we took what was Johnny De Jesus, we increased his business by about 20% because of the good job we did delivering for him. I took that contract because I took all the delivery ethics from the airport to go there. I then went back. I got a call one day to work for Emory Air Freight from David Porcaro. They got a big contract. So I was working for Emory. I went back to Logan Airport to work for Emory Air Freight. So because FedEx was dominating, starting to dominate the scene, and then their business, the union came in and we lost the contract, and I struck out on my own again, and it was then that I got a job with FedEx. Because I was at the airport, so I got a job at FedEx. No papers. I have my social security card and my driver's license. No green card. In those days, nobody asked for a green card. So I got in there. I worked for FedEx for 13 years. So as we said previously, I was born in Haspanapo in a suburb of Arima. Then I went to live on number 70 Cookery Street in Arima with my great-grandmother because she took me to school there. Then my mother got married to her second husband, which is after my father. So we went to live in Brazil Village with her in Brazil, Trinidad. This is a suburb of Arima, Brazil Village. So I lived there for about a year and a half to 2 years, went to school at the Catholic school there. From there, I moved back to Malabar and Arima to live with my uncle because my mother had moved back there. So from there, back to 70 Cookery Street, then with my mother, with my stepfather. I lived briefly there. So at the age of 9, I went to live permanently with my uncle because he decided to take me in. And my mother went with her third husband at the time, who was the father of 4 of my siblings, my 3 sisters and my last brother. So she went to live there, and they went to live in Carapo Village, and I stayed in Malabar and Arima with my uncle. I lived there till I was 14 years old, and from 14 years old we moved to Wallerfield, which is because we were getting 5 acres to do farming, and my uncle was working at TN Tech, which is the Electric Commission. He had a good job over there, and he wanted to do something on the side, so he wanted to do farming. And I was excited about that because I was going to mine a pig, and if I could raise one pig, sell it. Again, always looking to make a buck, I'd sell this pig. Never did raise any pigs while I was out there, but we were trying, but I was excited to move there. So we lived in Wallerfield till I got married. Till I was 18 years, I got married. And that's when I moved to live. I lived in my mother-in-law's house for about a year after I got married to my first wife, which is Tasha's mom. And then we moved to San Juan, Trinidad. I lived there for about a year. And from San Juan, I flew to Montreal, Canada with my aunt-in-law, who was my wife's mother, my wife's aunt. I lived there for 3 months, back to Hamilton, Ontario with my grandmother, then to Dorchester. Then my uncle said, well, you can't live up there. I'm going to bring you back. So they smuggled me across the border into America. And both my wife and I came to Dorchester. I lived with them. And I lived there in Dorchester for 2 years. And I didn't like how when Tasha walked in, it was a rough area. In those days, Dorchester was rough. Today, Dorchester is like Dorchester, England. It's a very upscale neighborhood in Boston. And I didn't like what was happening. I had bought a house. I left it there, and I moved to New Hampshire because I wanted to raise my kids. I didn't like the environment where she was going to be raised at that time. So I moved to New Hampshire. We lived there we went there in 1977 and lived there until 1990. I had a business up there. We had a restaurant, we had businesses and so forth. And I said at the time, I wanted to move south because we had lost a lot of money with the recession. That was in the days of George Bush, where you had 13 banks, not just individual branches, but 13 banks, like Bank of America, Bank of New England. They all closed. In the state of New Hampshire, 13 banks closed. So the economy tanked and the price of real estate plummeted. So we were upside down on more. I had a restaurant, I had a house I had built up there. Everything went upside down. So at that time I was working for FedEx, so I could move. I was able to move down south. So I ended up moving down to Georgia. We were going to go between Florida and Georgia because with my salary, what I was making, I could have lived very, very comfortable there. Whereas in New Hampshire, the taxes in New Hampshire at that time, $9,000 a year. This was in 89. So your taxes were $9,000 a year. And when I went to Florida on a vacation in Disney World in 1987, I saw people fishing and having barbecues. And I'm saying, it's insane. You're working like a dog in New Hampshire. That's all you ever do is go to work and come home, chop wood, and go to work and come home. And people I decided to move south. So my wife didn't want to move to Georgia. That's Lydia, my first wife. So so the compromise, it was between South Carolina, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, and Florida, and we settled on Georgia. So that's how we came to Georgia. That's how we lived here. So, and from there, we divorced I divorced, I think it was in I can't remember when we divorced, but I was 48 years old at the time when we divorced, and my first wife. And then I moved right up the street from Rockbridge Road to Pine Lake, Georgia. I lived there for 10 years. And from Pine Lake, Georgia, I got divorced all my real estate holdings, and I moved for Trinidad briefly, back and forth, Trinidad and the U.S., kind of moving around. Then I got married in 2012, and I moved to my wife, who's a pastor in a church. She has a small church. I was a pastor. I ended up moving to Brooklyn. I live in Canarsie, Brooklyn, or it's called, the section actually, it's called Flatlands, but it's close to Canarsie. That's the exact section, which is in the intersection of Utica Avenue and 51st Utica and Avenue I, at Kings Village, yeah. So we have a co-op over there. I kissed a girl called Maria Martinez. It was the first girl I ever actually kissed, French kiss, named the river behind the house. I was around 12 or 13 at the time, right? And the next relationship I had was with my first wife. I've been married 3 times. And I always believe in marriage because my mother was persecuted by men. She buried 4 husbands, three husbands. And she was the most faithful woman I ever know. And she lived in the most atrocious conditions. So being somebody who was raised, sort of almost raised myself by living on charity, I had a great respect for the institution of marriage and family and what it meant. So my first wife, I fell in love with her by going there, and when we got married, I was 20 years old when we got married. And we just dated for a while. And she ran up, we eloped. We actually eloped before we married. And then her mother was mad because we lived like one little village away, just about a couple miles away. And her parents were mad. And then this was the eldest daughter. Cut a long story short, went back, talked to her mother, and then we had a big wedding. So we had a real nice big wedding. I got married. We were married for 27 years. My first marriage. I never wanted to divorce. There was an issue in the relationship. That's my children's mother. And I will always tell people, she went another way and I wanted to stay and she wanted to move on. So, again, I hold no animosity against her. I was very disappointed and very hurt. But I'm the type of guy, for all these years, we were married, I never had no extra affairs or nothing like that. Maybe I will try maybe here and there, but no sort of like marital affairs. So that's why I said I live a very boring life. And I love to be married. I don't like living with people or shacking up. It was not my thing. So when I divorced my wife, my first wife, which is right here in DeKalb County, it hasn't been a good track record for me. So here with divorce, I got remarried right here with another girl from Trinidad, which is my second wife. Her name is Bidiauti Parry. She's a high caste Indian, for Brahmin Indian from Trinidad. She was married to a former pundit in Trinidad, so she came from a very wealthy family. And she was working, we got married, and we lived together for exactly 7 years. So the number, and again, something I want to mention is the number 7 in my life is very prominent. I was born on the 17th I was married for 27 years. I stayed, and then I married for 7 years. Stayed single for 7 years after that. I married my third wife. So it's 7, 7, 7, 7 has always been very important in my life. I made that observation after all these years. So I was married to my second wife because we met. I met her in working in a restaurant, and I used to go there, and I used to take her home. Cut along, we fell in love, got married. I said, okay, let's get married. And I don't like to shack up. We got married. We just got married up in Gwinnett County, but by it was a pastor married us. We went and registered the wedding. That was it. We lived together for 7 years. And during that 7 years, I did multi-million-dollar business, had restaurants, big development. I built 3 buildings in Pineley that are still standing there today. I did very well with her. We did very well. And her parents had different ideas. They wanted her to be a doctor. So they kind of separated us. But I had a very good relationship with my sister-in-laws and everything else. But she separated, and then I stayed in the place, and then the market turned on us. 2008, the market turned. So what was worth $1.2 million, my restaurant is now selling today for $250,000. And that time it was worth 1.2. We owed like 400,000 on that, and so everything we took some losses on there. So again, I have no issues with how my life turned out. Then I took a 7-year sabbatical from women. I was celibate for 7 years. Yep. And I got married to my third wife after being celibate for 7 years. So my dating wasn't. So I'm currently married. My wife is in New York. But I still have good relationships with my first and my kid's mother. I have no animals. I don't hate her and nothing like that. Although I figure I was wrong, but that's for another time and another place. Even though I was hurt, it was the worst experience of my life. But it's also, I would say this to you. When we divorced, or we were going through that very difficult period in our marriage, I spent 2 years trying to convince her to stay into the marriage. And after 2 years, I realized, you know what? I can't convince you. I have to let you go. So I had to let go everything I ever worked for, built up in my life. House, swimming pools, 2 houses, swimming pool, great place, great kids. I had to give up all that and walk away 2 suitcases after 27 years. But I was happy. But I was going crazy. I was about to go. It's either I stayed in there and go crazy or get out of it and kept my sanity. The reason why I'm sitting here, I can laugh and talk today, is because I made that decision. I could not be mad at her because I was going to be angry. And if I was angry and mad and hated her and bitter, it would have killed me. But that's a choice I tell people when you make in life. Somebody doesn't love you, or you fall out of love. Don't kill yourself or kill anybody or beat up or hate anybody. Because when you hate people, the only person you do is yourself. So not getting too soapboxy and operational, I think is anything else. And that's my relationships. Straight up. 1, 2, 3. Been married 3 times. My third wife is Merlin Mitchell, and she's a pastor. My sisters, after my mother died in 2012, my sisters and my aunt, who they go to this church in Brooklyn. I was in Trinidad at the time, and I wasn't married. They said, you can't. We got this pastor up there. We need to hook you up, and and that was I call almost like an arranged marriage, because I call her, and within 30 days later we were married. I'm not the dating type, and no, we're married. We're gonna get 5 years. She still doesn't know how the heck she was being married, but she said in her spiritual life, because they work and it was prophesied that she would marry, and they said this man is going to come. You wouldn't know when he's going to come from, where he's going to come, but it was a prophecy by several prominent spiritual entities, and prophesied that she was going to get married, and I was in that prophecy. So that's how we got married. I mean, it was prophetic. It wasn't like, you go on your romance and courtship. No, you were supposed to get married. I called on the phone. I said, okay, we're going to be married in so and so day, just like that. My first wife, it was, was supposed to be, I was my childhood sweetheart, right? So I just loved her to death, and that was the driving force that propelled me to do so many different things. I mean, when I lived in Canada, because we had just got married, maybe about a year and a half, because we were married just 2 years, because I got married in 71, April of 71, and she left for Canada in 1973. In 1973, she left for Canada, so 2.5 years. So when we came to Canada and we had our own place, all the foods I used to eat from back home, all the dishes, she used to cook. So that's what my cultural home away from home. I never missed nothing, right? And we just pretty much, my life was dedicated around my family. My 2 kids, when they were born, when Tasha was 6 years old, and I was still lifting her up to take her to private school. And until one day she said, Dad, please put me down. I said, oh, you're grown up. But if we went to a party, if I had to go to a party, I'd take my kids, they would sleep on the floor, and I'd leave. I never went anywhere without my kids or my family. My family was my life. That's why I had all the fun. I did everything within the family. I never went to nightclubs, never went to no ball games, or nothing like that. So that was, my family was my joy, my entertainment, everything was within the family. My second wife was right after we got together, maybe about exactly 30 days after my divorce from my first wife. We separated. And she's very interesting because she came from a very strict Hindu family in Trinidad. And Hinduism, 50% of the population in Trinidad is Hindus. And the brand of Hinduism and the observance of the Hindu tradition in Trinidad is probably much more, observed much more strictly than even in India. People from India come to Trinidad and look at how we observe Hinduism, and they are just taken aback, because we have this little island in the Caribbean, thousands of miles away from India, and you have this very, very strict Hindu culture. So she was divorced from her first husband, persecuted, very much so. And she is from the East, the Asian mentality. And for me, she was strictly, because of a back pain she had, right? Her mother-in-law sent a young clairvoyant, the guy who was a clairvoyant. His name was Hemorrhage. We're still friends to this very day. And he was able to come there, and when he came to our home to work on her back, because he used to he works on people with back problems. He was a healer. He still is a healer. Does this very day. He's a very mystical person. And he came there, and they used to do his morning prayers. Him and his girlfriend at the time. He used to do morning prayers, light a little fire, what's called a hawan. And in the back of the house, I said, while you're here, don't eat any meat while you're here, because part of his religion requires him not to eat meat. So that was the last time I ever ate meat for 15 years. So he came in there, and one morning he called me when they were doing the morning prayer. He called me in the back. And while I'm looking down at him sitting on the stoop, and I was standing, I'm looking down at him, and another entity came into his being. And this is something you got to understand about this mysticism. So another entity possessed his body, and that entity spoke to me and told me, you're one in a million. And with the Pujari, which is the guy who was the pundit, the guy I'm talking to, he says, you and him will be inseparable for the rest of your lives. You'll be with the Pujari all the time. And they told me, about eating meat. They says, well, you have the permission to eat meat. But if you choose, it's fine, whether you choose to eat meat or not. And I said, okay, I will honor your wish and I would not eat meat. I never ate meat up until about 3 months ago when so I went to the doctor told me that because I ate too much tofu, I had too much estrogen in my system. I had to start eating meat because it was affecting my blood pressure. And it did make a difference, truly, but I kept that. I was very, very, very strict with that. I never, Tasha would tell you, my kids will tell you that I was very strict. That was very good marriage in that we built the restaurant. I was doing a 24-unit subdivision. I was going to do. We did I did a house for my good friend who helped me with the business, and I built a house for him. The house is still there, brand 3-story house. I took a cottage that was the worst house in Pine Lake and built it into the most beautiful residence in Pine Lake. To this very day, the architecture that I started out is what goes on. Any new house built in Pine Lake today has to be patterned after that. So, and that's why I did all my my other businesses as well. So we did a lot of business. We did a lot of business, and I was up to millionaire class at that time until the market crashed. But that was the highlight of that marriage. My third wife, her name is Milden Mitchell. She was born in Trinidad and grew up most of her life in Brooklyn, New York. She has 2 kids. We met through my sister and my aunt. They got us together after my mother died at our mother's funeral. We had a family prayer, and they prophesied that I would be there. And they got in touch with her. My aunt says, well, my pastor needs a husband. It was one of those arranged, almost like it was an arranged marriage. She called and says, here's a phone number, give her a call, talk to her, and see what happens. I spoke to her, and I can say within about 30 days, I was up in Brooklyn, married and living in Brooklyn just like that, boom. She is very fascinating. She's a highly spiritual woman. She's a spiritual healer. And she used to work for Standard & Poor's for about 16 years. And she is now currently going to focus on her ministry full time because they had about a year ago, almost a year, they had Standard & Poor's are bought by a smaller company, and they just get rid of almost all the departments, wholesale, managers, whole divisions. And she was one of those. And so I told her now, we're going to focus now on the ministry. But she has a church in Brooklyn, and she was doing conferences in Trinidad. This is our 3rd conference, the 3rd and biggest conference we're going to do. And we're going to try to do, not necessarily for profit, but make sure at least it pays for itself. The others, she funded them. But for her, she is a deeply, deeply religious person, very gifted in the spirit. She does spiritual healing, and she can do some prophecies through the Holy Spirit. Not her, but the Holy Spirit through her does these things. And so that's the interesting part, about that relationship.
What's the name of her church?
The Place for Women Ministries in Brooklyn. You can go online. It's online. Place for Women Ministries. She has a church. She has churches in India that comes under her jurisdiction, and she has about 25 churches in India. We've just opened up a small orphanage in India with 12 or 13 kids in India. So we're housing 12 to 13 kids that we take care of, and we expanded to grow, and we want to do a nice ministry over there. As well as now she's expanding with relationships with pastors in Trinidad, pastors here. Now we're going to grow this ministry. It's probably going to go very global, and this year it's going to go global. But we're a very small church, not 400 or 500 members. But the people that are there are very honest, they're very dedicated. But there are very few pastors I know in the United States has a spiritual gift that she has. And she's not there in it for the money. She's just there to spread the word, and she's honest as the day is long. On your wedding day, I would say this: be the best wife you can be, because you can't change anybody. The only person that you can change is you. And if you're the best person you could ever be, and this person chooses to play the fool, it's on them. The other most piece of advice I tell you, if your husband cheats on you, he's cheating on himself. Because sooner or later, everybody's going to find out, as smart as he is, as whatever. They're going to find out. If you cheat on your husband, sooner or later, he is going to find out. And the only person who's cheating is you. So always be honest. Even never say you're going to be unfaithful to your husband or your wife because they're unfaithful to you. It's not going to solve a problem. Most important, be faithful, be honest, and everything else is icing. I was told when I was a very young man, before I was even married, and this was from Norman Vincent Peale. I read it at 14 years old. It said, as a married couple, even after you're married, no matter how poor or broke you are, after marriage, even if it's 2 spoons, you will have it at the end of a marriage. Single people, chances of them having anything is always nil. So I was a person that studied a lot of books. As I told you, I used to read in school, and I used to study a lot of books. And I used to, not only did I read the books, but I used to apply what I read into real life. And it's a proven fact that people that are married are always wealthier than people that are single. I was always broke when I was single. I was always had money when I got married. Well, I was 25 years old at the time. And my wife told me she was pregnant. It was a very happy occasion. I was living in Dorchester, Massachusetts, next to St. Margaret's Hospital, where Tasha was born. But being a parent for me was the most rewarding thing in my entire life. I tell people to this very day, I've accomplished a lot of things in my life. The most important thing is to see my children and my grandchildren. And I was going to put this to you in perspective. My uncle raised me up from the time I was 9 till I was 18. He never hit me. Or if I did something wrong, he would, no matter how busy he would sit down and explain to me what it is I did wrong. And I used to tell my aunt-in-law at the time, my aunt, please, why doesn't he beat me like other kids so I can go out and play or do something? This talk is just kill me because I'll feel so guilty because he'd make me understand why I did wrong. That form of discipline carried out to my children, and today is carried on my children. But that form of discipline caused me many of the successful things I've done in my life is as a result of me being able to sit and have empathy for people, sit down in your shoes, listen to what people have to say. Because when you explain to people what it is wrong, what they're doing wrong, you have all kinds of responses by hitting or yelling at people. And my worst enemy, I will sit down and talk to them and reason with them. And we solve all our problems. That has passed on to my daughters and has passed on to my grandkids. I taught my Natasha to wear her seatbelts when they didn't want to wear it. And my grandkids would not go in a car without seatbelts because we trained them about that. And the thing about it is being a parent was the most, like I said, the most rewarding experience in my life. To watch my kids that have grown up, I feel blessed and fortunate to know I can come into my daughter's home. My other daughter is up there. They have the kids. I can look at my grandkids that are all being raised. Nothing in this planet I've ever done in my life makes me more happier than that. If I die today, I die a very happy guy. If I get sick or whatever happens to me, the rest of my life, I will go with that joy and happiness because I was able to live to see my kids get big. I live to see my grandchildren and how they're growing. Nothing in this world I could ever do trumps that. Nothing. So that's what I think about parenting. I have 2 daughters. That's Nadia and Natasha. Natasha being my firstborn, Natasha my second. At this time, they're 41 and 36. Nadia, she was reading at 3 years old. She went to Catholic school, private school, kindergarten, and the nuns taught her to read. And she had certificates. By the time she went to high school and school, she had certificates that plastered the entire room, all from the floor to the ceiling and some in a drawer. She's a genius kid. It surprised me. Nadia, that's my second daughter, went on to college, graduation. She has a very difficult marriage, but because they kind of dropped out of school, she went back. She finished, completed her graduation. So she's going to get her master's right now. She's doing very well, raising her kids. She has two daughters. I have two granddaughters with them, Nisi and Nyla. They're like 12 and 11. Beautiful, beautiful kids. And what's remarkable about her is that she was able to, with as difficult as the situation was and still is this very day, still kind of keep her head above water. Tough. My other daughter, Natasha, was two things is very outstanding about her. When she was like between 18 months to 2 years old, whenever she'd go to the bathroom, every time I sit down to eat, we sit down to dinner, she'd call, Dad, you need to come and clean me up. She didn't want her mother to clean her up, or nobody else has me. And we only do it when we sit down to eat. Like she knew, I don't know what it was about that. So I had to go clean her up right in the middle of my meal every time. She would call. But so she's the one that moved from New Hampshire, moved to Georgia. But what's remarkable about this child is the entrepreneurial spirit. She's into real estate because she saw me go to so many houses looking at real estate, because we did a lot of that. She went, she studied, did nursing for a little while, and that got boring for her because she said, I saw all these dead bodies, all the bodies coming in, riddled with bullets. And she said, I wanted to see what causes the bullets. So she joined the police force. This is that wasn't good. She joined the police force. She said, Dad, I'm bored. She wanted to be a detective. She became one of the youngest detectives and fastest in the police force. She became a detective. That got boring. She moved on to that. She became a sergeant. That got boring. But I told her when her daughter was like, Tony was like 9 or 10, I said, listen, you got to do something. You got to be with her for a little bit. She needs shepherding. So she did go. And she did go and got this new job, which she's currently in today, as a lecturer. So that, but what is amazing about her is that every time she gets bored, she packs up and leaves, and the girl is always able to keep her head as a single parent. I admire her for that. That she is doing so fantastic, so well, that these things make me so happy. That the things we always, take care of family, take care of home, does it marvelously. So that's it. For Nadia, I was at a lawyer's office in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and she asked to use the bathroom, and I sat down in there, and she was singing in the bathroom. She was like 2 years old. For Natasha, I think I was working for Dave Porcaro. That's at Logan Airport in Boston. And I had a small 40-ton line van, which I took packages and delivered. We had nobody to babysit. So she was with me that day in the van. And she wanted to go to the bathroom. I said, just hold on a minute. I said, pick up this package at the loading dock. And when I came back, she had done her numbers inside the truck. I almost cried. I was embarrassed. I almost cried. But that was one of those days. No, I wasn't strict or lenient. I did the same principle that my uncle did. I talked to my kids. I never used to beat them. I sit down and talk to them. And if they did something wrong, I put them to sit down and explain to them why they did what they was wrong. And that held sway with them all the time. The only time I think I remember hitting Tasha was with a little switch on her feet. That was one time I ever hit. Other than never strike them, never hit them. I always did sit down and told them what they did wrong. Even when they were like 18 months old, you would speak to them as an adult. And because you speak to them as an adult from the time they were babies, right up until now, you never talk no baby talk with them. They learned everything. It was a little difficult. It was happy and sad because Tasha came crying to me. It was out of wedlock. And she came crying out. I forget, she walked up to me in the parking lot of the restaurant and she began to cry. And I hugged her and I said, you know what? I love you, my child. And it was great to be a grandpa. I mean, it was just weird. Caught me by surprise. But my granddaughter, I love her so much. And is that she never ceases to amaze me to this very day. So well put together. So well, I mean, and she's doing such a great job raising that child. And all my grandkids, as a matter of fact. But she's just marvelous child, just amazing child. So I look to see when I had them opportunities she had, and she has 10 times more opportunities that I had, or Tasha had, or her mom had. So I'm looking to see the progression, and I'm very, very pleased with that. My father, his name was, he had two names, Russell Utley and Albert Francis. He was born, I think, in Grenada. But he was dead before I was born. And my mother, we lived in High where I was born. My grandmother came, my mother was pregnant, and he was a seaman, he was a cook on a ship. And my grandmother came up that morning, and my mother looked at her walking up. And the night before, my mother had dreamt in a dream, and he washed his hands, and he just shook his hand and dried his hand. And he says, I'm finished. And my grandmother, the next morning, my grandmother was walking up towards the house. And she came to say, I came to tell you, we got news from overseas that Albert had died. And that's why I knew that was my father. So my father was dead before I was born. I have a picture of him. That's all I can remember. And he said he had about 24 kids. I don't know. I know none of them. I was the last. I think I was his last child. But he died very young. He died about 30 years old when he was dead. He was very young when he died. And I'm the spitting image of my father. Yes. Yeah, my father, my mother's a short little red Spanish woman, and I'm tall. My mother is, if there was something to describe love, love guided us. And it was her love for us, her children, that infused in us that even when I was away from my mother for 9 years, because all my brothers and sisters grew up together, they were never separated. I was the eldest, and I was the only one didn't grow up with my brothers and sisters. But I always felt my mother was right close to me all the time. I always felt she was close. She was the most remarkable woman. She sent my other brothers to school with nothing. They had nothing. She had very, very bad husbands, two very bad. Her second husband and third husband were very, very, very bad to her. But she survived, always being faithful, always sent my kids. And she sent my other brothers and sisters under the worst circumstances to go to school. And they always excelled in academia. She made sure everybody excelled, everybody graduated from college, and she took them through high school. They were able to go on to, all of them were able to go on to college after that and do distinguished careers, in several fields. But it is because my mother loved her children so much that she became a great person in our lives. And we owe all to my third stepfather, who was an alcoholic, a gambler, and a womanizer. None of us drink or smoke or chase women because of him, because we didn't want us to follow in his footpath. So it was a blessing to know that because of the struggles my mother went through, that's the reason why when I say I marry some, I don't just date people. I marry them because it's the dignity of a woman, not to ill-treat women or beat them up or ill-treat them. And that's part of that what's made me today. But she is gone now. She died about 5 years ago, raised all 7 kids, buried one, and she was the most remarkable woman in our lives. And she taught us everything about what it is to be faithful, irregardless of how the other party is doing bad. She stayed faithful, never strayed, believed in God, prayed for us, and sacrificed her life. She lived her last 20 years of her life. Her last husband treated her the very best and was the happiest time in her life. To 20 years, and still lived another 10 years after he died. So her last days in her life on this earth were very well spent, and she enjoyed the last few days of her life. And she lived a very charmed and blessed life. She died. When she died, all the 6 siblings that were alive, we were handing her around. We'd hold her and pray for her. And my brother and I gave her a bath before she died. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. And I was in the kitchen doing dishes at my sister's home. And she had just laid her down in the bed. My brother called me and said, she's gone. But she died in our arms. She died literally died in our arms. So she lived a very, very wonderful life. A big funeral. Great people came from all ministers and all kinds of public officials came to her because of the life she lived. She wasn't famous in any big, but the life she lived and who she knew and who she touched, the lives she touched. Many people who would have nothing, she would raise them, take care of them, feed them, do this, and touch so many, many, many lives that she had the greatest send-off and is the greatest example to all of us. Russell Utley, father, mother, Benedicta Hernandez, but she died Benedicta Salandi. But my grandmother was Miss Agnes Lopez. She was from Grenada, lived in Trinidad, and she died in Canada, in Hamilton, Ontario. That's on my father's side. That's the only, I only know about, that's the only thing. On my mother's side, my grandmother was Leontil Villarreal. That was my grandmother. My grandfather was Lawrence Hernandez. My great-grandmother she was Megalit, right, Hernandez. And my great-great-grandmother was Antonio Hernandez. And my great-grandfather was Pedro Villarreal. He could only speak fluent Spanish, could not do English. And he's a guy who was a very entrepreneurial guy, always died. He died with $300 under his mattress and 2 estates. And back in those days, that was a lot of money, and he was a very wealthy guy. My great-grandfather was John Francis Wallen, who became the mayor of the Chartered Borough of Arima in Trinidad in 1910. He was a very well-educated gentleman. He studied at the Sorbonne in Paris. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country at the time in Trinidad. And that's my great-grandfather, and that's who I took the name Wallen. So he's John Francis Wallen. And we have a whole bunch of family. Any Wallens in Trinidad related, and almost all the Wallens in Brooklyn, if you see a Wallen, would have come from Trinidad and they're related. I don't keep up with much of them because that was on that side. But that's my great-grandfather. And I forgot to mention that. Yeah, he built the first dial in Arima. The ever-famous dial in Arima was built by him. He donated to the city. And his portrait, which is about a 6x4 portrait, is hung in the borough of Arima. The chartered borough was chartered by Queen Victoria. And I think Arima was the first chartered borough, I think, anywhere in the Caribbean and the West Indies. It's called the Borough of Arima. And he was the second mayor, John Francis Wallen. I'm the eldest. One after me is 5 years junior. That's Mark Hernandez. And we had another one, David Hernandez, who is passed on. After that, we have June Salandi, which is our eldest sister. Then my other sister is Joanne Salandi. Our last sister is Jennifer Salandi. And my youngest brother, who's the baby of the family, he is Terrence Salandi. And that's our siblings there. Well, the brother after me, he was the first babysitting job I ever had. I was 5 years old. I used to lie on the floor, and he used to run across the floor and dive on my chest. So I remember raising him. He's a great guy. He's an author, graduated from school. He lives in Tampa, Florida right now with his wife for about 30 years now. He's done very well. He's got 2 great kids that went to law school, and he's very good. My other brother, unfortunately, our third brother, died. He was a brilliant guy. He went to University of New Hampshire, and he got a Fulbright scholarship. They were paying him to go to school. He was so brilliant. He never used to study, just go take all the exams and pass them, all the way from Trinidad. He was living in New Hampshire, yet. And he had one son, and that son died a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, that son died. But he had sickle cell, so he used to get pain. So he had, that was his problem throughout his life. And he died. He died the same day my last brother got married. So they had a wedding and a death on one day. My mother almost just, she had to, it was a very difficult time for us. My other sister, who is a pastor now, June, she graduated from Bible College. She's a minister. She has her own church in Tobago, island of Tobago. My other sister is married. She's part minister, part administrator. She's president of the Parent Teachers Association of the island of Tobago. She's doing very well. She has two sons. Yeah, my other second sister has 3 kids. So I have some nephews there. Our last sister, she's Jenny. She's a linguist. She lives in Germany. She works for Daimler Chrysler, interpreting, teach people English, and she speaks about 7 languages. Lived in Israel, so she teaches all the Germans how to speak English, and people coming from, like the refugees coming, she'd go to refugee camps, help them interpret and teach them English and stuff like that. She's been in Germany for about 10 or 12 years now. Lived in Canada all over. Our last brother, who's the only one, well, is living in Trinidad. Everybody else in Tobago or somebody, he lives in Trinidad. He works for the security services in Trinidad. He works with like special ops for the police service. He used to guard the president, guard presidents, governors. That's what he does. So he runs a highly secretive organization in the country that, so he's still there. He's doing very well. Has 2 daughters. They're doing very well, brilliant kids. So we're blessed with everybody has done very, very well academically and community-wise. I would say communication for us was a big plus, because when I was growing up, when in Trinidad, people were migrating to England. At that, they were just going up from going to England. People started going to the United States in the 60s. In the 50s, they went to England and before, and after that, they went to America. And when you were growing up, if somebody had to have a message, whenever you see cable and wireless, which is like the Western Union of Trinidad and Tobago, cable and wireless is the British counterpart of that. So there's a guy with a motorcycle. Whenever you see this motorcycle coming anyplace else, they come to deliver the news that a relative from overseas had died, right? And so there was letters, you wrote letters. Then thereafter that, it came a little better in the 60s towards the 70s. You could go to Port of Spain. You have to travel from the country or to go into Port of Spain, the capital, to cable and wireless to get on a phone. And you used to pay $3 a minute to call somebody in the United States, right? Today, you can get on a phone and with WhatsApp or WeChat, talk to somebody for free in the United States, do FaceTime in the United States. And it was a big expense for us when we came here to America, because in the 70s and the 80s in the United States, it was $3 US a minute to talk to somebody in Trinidad. It was almost impossible to call anybody in Trinidad. So technology, that was a big difference between then and now. So we went from writing letters to now you can talk to somebody around the globe as though you're right around the corner. Clear, crisp conversations. For me personally, I would say a cell phone. Because I remember using beepers in the 80s. And you had to run to get to a telephone. I think it's fascinating. You can have a telephone. I can talk to my granddaughter here. I was in China for about a month. I can talk to my daughter in China just as though I was talking to them right around the corner. So that to me was the most life-changing piece of technology. I'm very pragmatic. And the reason why I say that is because I didn't come of age. When I left Trinidad, I never voted when I left Trinidad. I wasn't old enough to vote when I left Trinidad. I was in between elections, because every 5 years. And then I couldn't vote because I didn't have a green card, so I couldn't vote. But however, I lived in New Hampshire for almost 20 years, and politics is shaped my image of what the American political system is all about. In New Hampshire, the government is there at your service. It's like going down to Quick Trip or Macy's. Government is run like Macy's. They are there to serve you. And every step, whether it's a city government, and which is mostly in New England, is mostly city government. It's not county government. It's mostly city, and then you've got the state. That's the old American system. And whether you go to get something done at the state level or at the county level, you are treated as a valuable customer. I used to walk into Governor John Sununu's office because I worked for FedEx on a Friday afternoon, and he would walk and he said, Anthony, he's a Republican the way God meant it to be. And we used to joke and laugh about that. And that's my image of government. Now, it was the Republican Party. Well, I had issues when I did get my green card, and I went to Senator Warren Rudman's office, and we had a situation resolved. They didn't want to issue the green card to my wife. He made a phone call to the passport department, immigration department in Boston, which had jurisdiction over us. When my wife went there, they were waiting to give her the stuff right then and there. They interceded for us. So government and politics was something where government is there to serve you. Politicians are there to serve you. So my view was shaped by living in New Hampshire. Because of that, wherever I traveled and my children traveled, they know that government is there to serve them, and people have this respect for the government, so that we were able to get things done. When I lived in Pine Lake, Georgia. It was dry since 1939, it was dry, up until 2007, 60-something years. I got the first liquor license in the city of Pine Lake, because I just did government just the way I know how. I mean, and it was supposed to be the most racist place in the state of Georgia. And yet still, because of my way of dealing with government, I dealt with them just as though I did in New Hampshire. And people treated me the same and reciprocated that same treatment. I am still very well respected in the city of Pine Lake. I mean, I have good relations with the mayor. I go to see the police chief, Chief Yehuda. I would hug her and embrace her. And yet for most people, Pine Lake is a place where you can't go into jail and go all kinds of stuff. But it's New Hampshire, and I lived there after 2 years in the United States, I lived in New Hampshire. And it's because of that great Republican form of government. It wasn't racist. They were there to serve you. I was never discriminated against. And this was one of the most whitest states in the Union. My daughter went to school there. She was never discriminated one time. All her friends that she has there, still have the same friends to this very day, from kindergarten all the way up. So my idea of racism and governance in the world is shaped by that, and I think that was a very pleasant experience for me. Politics, I don't know, it could change tomorrow. We don't know if Trump is there, who knows? But at the end of the day, I know what government, if people study what government's all about, I think for most time, they would find that it's not as bad as people think it is. It's a reflection of you and what you think. I think Nelson Mandela is, in my opinion, was one of the persons that had it was one of the greatest influences on my person as a political figure. When Nelson Mandela was freed, I think it was one of the greatest moments I could remember in political history, the freedom of Nelson Mandela. We never thought they'd ever sing that, because I was a child. They were singing calypsos about Rhodesia in Trinidad. And they were singing about apartheid in Trinidad. We were little kids. And to come back, we thought it was impossible that Nelson Mandela was free. I never thought I would live to see that day. And I lived to see it. 43 years. I was excited when Barack Obama was elected president. I mean, I knew about it long before. I was privy to some information that most people don't have. Barack Obama was appointed president. by the Freemasons. You have to be a Freemason to be a president of the United States. Tertiary and third degree Freemason. And I knew that information when the appointment came. They said he'd be the next president. I'm not a Freemason, but I know somebody that was, and they said, I just heard news that the Grand Lodge in Chicago just said Barack Obama is going to be the next president of the United States. But I would say, for me, Ronald Reagan holds a special place in my heart. And I'll tell you the reason why. Ronald Reagan was able to find immigration reform, and he signed the bill that I got my green card today and I became a citizen. And I remember that very well. Ronald Reagan signed that, 1987. Yeah, I could tell you exactly. I was going up Interstate 93, going up towards home from out of Boston, Interstate 93 going up to Derry, New Hampshire, and the news came over on National Public Radio that President Reagan had signed the executive order to legalize all, who are illegal to get a green card. It was the most exciting day in my life because for 15 years I was under a deportation order. Every year I'd go file a motion, every year, pay $1,000, file a motion. The case would last a year, you go back the next year, file another motion. We're waiting on something to happen. And it is. So 15 years I was there. So that was, to me, was one of the most happiest days of my life. I can remember that day. That afternoon I came home, told my wife in the kitchen, I says, we're free now. We can go home. Because some people, my grandmother died, my great uncle died, I couldn't go to the funeral back home. So it was very sad. I lost a lot. I mean, sometimes I think that I should have stayed home because but God meant it to be so. I figured if I stayed home, I probably would have been better off if I had stayed home and tried to be, but everything that happened in my life up here was very, very well. So I'm happy with that. Where I was born in Hasikonapo, the military occupied the largest military base, I think, during World War II was in Trinidad. Wallerfield was in Trinidad. That base supplied all the bombing runs for Germany, right in Trinidad. And we always referred to Americans as this great beacon of hope and light for the world. People always respected Americans. Because my great uncle, who was my grandmother's brother, had two military officers used to come who were white guys. Now my great uncle, again, he's Hispanic, he looks white, but they used to come way up in the mountains where he is up there from the military base. They used to bring a bottle of rum and a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes for him. And they used to smoke, and they used to just sit and drink and don't say nothing. They just wanted a place to escape. I remember seeing from World War II where they used to take target practice. They had these drums that were still there where they used to shoot with target. I saw those drums. They were rusted out at the time because I was born in 1951. It was just about 4 years after the war. So that war was fresh in our minds. And the town, Arima, became a great town because of that big, huge military base. It's about almost the size of Atlanta, the base, and they occupied all of it with the airfield. And that influenced our town because people came from all the other small islands, Grenada, St. Vincent, Martinique, Guadeloupe, Venezuela, come to Trinidad because that was the land of milk and honey. It changed because the Americans were paid great money. And it changed, and it did change Trinidad from a sort of agricultural to a more industrial. That was the beginning of that time. We became much more industrialized. But our view of America influences our fashion, culture, class, slangs, what we do. There's nothing happens on the street of the ghetto that instantly is in Trinidad and being interpreted. We have gangs over there. Unfortunately, we have gangs, we have drugs, and people want to have the gang warfare, shooting one another, just like kids do. They do the same thing. The rap music, they rap, they do everything, but it permeates and dominates our culture. CNN News is shown in the farthest corner of Trinidad. This is what you see around the corner. CNN, NBC, MSNBC, they know more about America than the Americans that live here. Yep, that's a fact. The Vietnam War for us I was a teenager during the Vietnam War, it was in the 70s. So I came here in 1973 when the Vietnam War just ended, 74. I came when the Vietnam War just ended. During that time, it was the time of the 60s. This was the time when people, the Black Power movement was being, and in Trinidad, we had our own Black Power movement. Back then, Barclays Bank only hired white people. And in Barclays Bank in Trinidad, which is a British, they're still around today, Barclays Bank is still there. You used to only put money in the bank. Any Trinidadian never borrowed money from the bank. The bank was to deposit money. So during that time, with the 60s, when we had this Black Power movement, we had a Black Power movement in Trinidad. They had natives to work at Barclays Bank because back then only white people worked at the bank. So it changed our dynamics. We became independent. So we were very much following what the Black Power movement in the United States. Everything, it changed what we were doing in Trinidad as well. So when they were marching in the U.S., we were marching in Trinidad. When Otis Redding died, they were playing Otis Redding on the CDs all over in Trinidad. So we were followed up everything. And I left shortly after that. But everything in Trinidad was geared after America. Everything. So it influenced what we did over there. I was looking at television that morning, and I looked at this plane like a little aircraft, like a Piper Cub, hit the World Trade Center. So I thought it was a little plane. As we get to realize in a few minutes it was the second plane hit. That's when we realized that something was wrong. And within a few minutes, I didn't leave home. After that, I ended up watching TV for like a day and a half straight, watching everything unfold before us, the horrors that unfolded before us. I mean, it was just terrible. I was home in Pine Lake. My wife was a nurse in the hospital. She was an assistant, and she went in there, couldn't come back home, and everything was, it was just a very, very tough time. Yeah, chief, boss. I used to be called chief at Dave Porcaro because Mr. Porcaro, I called him chief, and then they didn't call me chief. So we used to call one another chief. That was my nickname. That's Dave Porcaro, the owner of Dave's Motor Freight at Logan Airport. My other business partner is a lawyer and attorney. We call each other boss. We call one another boss, and we talk to one another. At the temple, they used to call me like assistant pujari. They used to call me pujari. I was living at a Hindu temple for 4 years. And in order to live there, you had to have no sex, no alcohol, no meat, or nothing. And I used to sleep on the temple floor. And there was a record. I slept there for almost 4 years. And that was a very highly spiritually charged place. So you have spiritual entities from the other world come to manifest. So if you were clean, or if you had you couldn't go there unless you were absolutely positively clean. So and I was a non-Hindu, raised Catholic, and I used to live there. But because of some of my vows and what I took, I was able to enter this space and live there, and nobody else couldn't. I used to sleep sometimes by myself, many, many nights. I slept right on the floor on a 2-inch sponge. Trinidad. That's after my second marriage, when my 7-year sabbatical from women. I spent 4 years there. I didn't, in my memory, it's not the funniest part. I pulled on anybody, but here's the most funniest thing in memory that I could remember. It was the World Scout Jamboree in 1960 in Trinidad, and there was a parade at the main grandstand. So all the scout masters and everybody left, and that day we were left to cook food. I was about 11 or 12 at the time, and we had this little kid. One of the scout masters had a Triumph motorcycle, and we had this little kid. I can't remember his name now, but he said, "My uncle has a motorcycle, and I can know how to ride this." So we sat on the motorcycle, and he was pretending, that this is how you started. And for some reason, he pressed his foot, hit, and the motorcycle started. Let me tell you, and he was getting blue, trying to shut it because they could hear the big noise all the way out to the stage. So he was going to get his tail creamed. I laughed. To this very, we all laughed. We rolled on the floor. We were laughing because He was a, I know about the motorcycle. My uncle knows this, and and he couldn't stop that motorcycle. I'm talking a good 50 years ago. Yeah, 50 plus years ago. I'm still laughing. Anything that has to do with construction, cooking, and doing business and restaurant business. I just love business, period. That's one of my greatest pleasures, being in business. I've had very few pets in my life. We had a dog. Well, I do have a dog right now. His name is Enoch. Nice little dog. But the pet that, as a family, that we had was a mastiff. Her name was Gracie, and just loved the kids. And that dog was a huge dog, and that dog was it was just one of the best dogs I ever had, or family pet that we had. And he used to look after the kids. Nobody could come after Tasha or Nadia, and just chase them around the yard and bite them in the drawers and chase them around. But he was such a huge dog, but it was a gentle, gentle, gentle dog. The governor of the state of New Hampshire, I met George Bush when they were running. I was in New Hampshire when he was running. I met Dukakis, Governor Dukakis. I met him. I met Senator Warren Rodman. I met Senator of New Hampshire. I met, at my restaurant, a lot of famous people came through my restaurant, very, very famous people. Governor Roy Barnes used to be there. I met famous lawyers, ambassadors. I met quite a few, yes. Benedict Moreno was my childhood friend. He is 2 years older than me, so he's like 68 right now. And I've known him since I was like 9 years old. So I've known him for 50-something years. Yes, believe it or not, one of my most prized possessions, which I lost, was a ring I got for FedEx for 13 years of safe driving. We got a diamond ring. I lost it. I don't know where it was. I just lost it. But that was one of the awards I got. To me, it meant something to drive for 13 years for FedEx and don't have an accident. Gerard David, my 5th standard school teacher from Trinidad. Everything I know, everything I've studied, I learned in that 5th standard class. I can run, like Tasha said, Dad, how can you run figures? You can calculate mortgage rates and do figures and all kinds of stuff. I learned it in that class. And people are amazed to say, well, how come you can, all these figures? I think I talked to accountants and I said, well, okay, your mortgage rate could be X, Y, and Z. And they said, well, how come can you do that? I said, I don't know, I'm simply a Trini guy. But I learned it from that class. Near-death experience, no. I haven't had a near-death experience, but I have talked to people who were dead before. When I was living in Brazil Village, what people don't understand, Shango Baptist, or Shango, is a Yoruba religion that was brought over from Africa. So that when you die, your soul doesn't just evaporate, you just don't die. What makes you your soul is it's an entity that's there for eternity. And all you are is, like, to explain to you like this, it's like this. If you have a phone and your phone is dead and you can put a chip, you can take a chip, your phone, I can take your chip, put it in my phone, and all your numbers and everything comes up, it's your phone. Somebody called. A human being, you has a soul, it's like a chip. If I take that chip, if I'm dead, I can take that, my phone is crushed up, let's say, if your phone is crushed, you can pull out that chip and put it inside another person, and you function. That's best to explain it. So if your phone is crushed to pieces, and you just take out your chip, put it in another good phone, it's function. Your soul is the same thing. I learned that when I was like 4, 5 years old. The Shango, it's a Shango feast. And they used to invoke spirits. So these are people who are dead many years. And I can remember to this very day, so I'm looking at 66, I'm looking at 61 years ago. Stone Bull, I remember Stone Bull, Mr. Reggie. These are entities that used to be invoked by Ma Wang, a woman called, a Spanish woman, spread her leg open at 6 o'clock. They went to the Catholic Church, do the confession, come back home and do the feast. And Mr. Stonebridge used to come. When Stonebridge was talking, the guy's voice, he had a deep baritone voice, and when he's speaking, the ground used to tremble. And my one will be just, he was going, then Stonebridge, and you say, good night, Mr. Stonebridge, and you ask him any question. If you lost your ring or lost it, you ask him anything. So I knew from a very early age that people lived. You don't just, when you die, you just don't evaporate. You have a soul, it's a spirit. When they say rest in peace, you need to let people rest in peace. That's why you perform certain rituals and ceremonies. When I was in the temple, many occasions, I talked to many entities from different worlds, from different galaxies that do exist, that I spoke to, that came from galaxies talking languages that you won't understand. I'm living with my wife. I live with my wife. She's not a spiritualist, but she is and she speaks with the Holy Spirit, and she speaks in tongues. And that is people that come, that is from another world. So I'm very much exposed to that. My temple guru, he wasn't the best guy in the world, but he almost killed his wife a couple of times. And you know, I'm one of the only spirits that he would listen to. He wouldn't listen to his father, mother, or anybody else. And we had that connection. I could talk to him and say, listen, just be still, don't do that. I talked to his wife, prayed with her, put my hands on her. And the most memorable experience I could tell you, one of our temple sisters, her father was given 1 day to live. And he was terminal, he was diabetic, they cut his foot off, heart, he was going to die the next day. And his daughter wanted her uncle to come from Florida to come back to Trinidad to see, he wanted to see him before he died. And I said, okay. The pundit at the time was in India. And I said, well, you know, God is always here. If you want to pray, God is here. And we prayed. He lived for 31 days after that. And we knew how we live and why, because he was supposed to die the next day. And the doctors couldn't figure it out. We prayed and we knew exactly what happened. Her mother, at that time, her mother was away. They were able to sleep for 31 days. They were at peace with themselves because they knew that changed. I mean, that's just one example. There's a couple more, but we'll just leave it at that. The scariest thing that ever happened to me, I think, was when one of the temple brothers found out that his wife was unfaithful to him. And we were in the temple grounds, and he ran in the temple. I was about 40 feet away from him. And he ran in with a machete to chop his wife's head off. The guy who was his wife's boyfriend, who was also a temple brother, and he was so quiet and so most pious and holy guy, but he was just sharpening his part. And he ran in with a machete, and we were 40 feet. And we couldn't say nothing or do nothing, and somehow he didn't chop the guy's head off. And we knew he was going to chop his head off. I mean, we couldn't do nothing. But somehow, that was one of the most scariest moments. Well, I would say one of the things that changed my life is when I got divorced from my first wife, my child's mother. Yep. That changed the trajectory of my life. It was so painful. I was able to overcome that. And I've been happy. There's a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is when, like, I just bought a car. I got a brand new car. You're happy because the Braves won the game. You're happy. Joy is when you have pain and you say, I have a joy in my heart. I know that when I come through this, that's a joy. It's an eternal happiness. So that's joy. So that when I was able to overcome that obstacle, it brought joy in my life. It was the most painful experience, but it was the most rewarding experience in my life. I've been happy ever since. One of the most difficult choices I had to make was when my uncle, who raised me up in New Hampshire, was dying. And my aunt-in-law called me from Georgia. I had to fly up to New Hampshire. And I had to sit with the doctor. The doctor said, she called me, she said, listen, we had to pull the plug on him. And the doctor sat down and explained to me his prognosis, that if we removed life support, He's probably going to live, he could live maybe a month, a week, he could live a couple hours. But he's brain dead, he's going to go. And my aunt said to me, of all the people I want, Tony, I want you to make the decision, nobody else. Not her, not his son, not his children, not her, not everyone. She said, I want you to make that decision. I had to make that decision. And I had to make the decision to pull the plug. He died within about a couple hours after that, about 45 minutes after that, he died. But I had to make that decision. It's tough, but, I made it. I listened to what the doctor told me, understood exactly what he said. I was able to come to that decision. Everything in your life has been predestined to happen. That's number one. Two, everything that happened in your life, there was a purpose and a reason for that. To give you an example, my stepfather, who was an alcoholic, womanizer, drunk, and everything else, if he didn't drink, if he didn't give my mother a hard time, if my mother didn't suffer, all my siblings, we probably might have been drinking and gambling all over the place. Because of that, we all became very successful in life, lived a very moral and upright life. And everything that happens in your life, if my wife we didn't divorce, my first divorce, the joy and deep understanding and spirituality and happiness that I have today, I never would have had that. When you have pain and suffering in your life, it's a key to a door. It opens a door in your spirituality. So these are things, you come in this world to learn lessons. And the more lessons you learn, the better off you are. You understand? So everything that happens in your life is for a reason and a purpose. Sometimes it takes a lifetime. Sometimes you exit this world and don't know what that reason is. But you came here to do one thing. The best example for that, and I'll be very brief, is the reason why we wear seatbelts today. I do, and my kids and my grandkids, is because I was teaching a class on safety driving at FedEx, and I called a Connecticut state trooper to do a presentation. And on an 8-track tape, he said there was this girl, the name of the tape is Room to Live. And there was this episode where this young lady was dying, and she was asking for her mommy and her daddy. She was a 26-year-old, and she was talking as a 2-year-old child. So, and she was asking for her mommy. That tape caused me to be wearing a seatbelt. And it was the last thing that woman did in her life before she exited, mommy. And that one statement caused me to wear a seatbelt. I came back home and told my wife to wear a seatbelt. I told my 2 kids to wear a seatbelt, who told our grandkids to wear a seatbelt. And there are hundreds of other people who listened to that one tape that today they're wearing seatbelts today. Thousands of people and thousands of lives are saved because of that. So sometimes in your lifetime, you would do something and you would feel it's inconsequential. Every action you make has a reaction, everything you do. So that was her purpose in life, to save all these lives. And she died. Didn't know that her statement, the last word she said on this planet, would save so many thousands of lives. So, do I have regrets, or do I want to change anything? I don't know. I can't write on that. I think China fascinated me. I spent a month in China, and I've never had the opportunity to go clear across the other part of the world. And I was amazed to see how technologically advanced. America looks like a third world country compared to China. Yep. It's crazy to say, but America looks like a third world country. I mean, I'm not saying everywhere in China is like that, but the places I went to when I went to several cities where I was over there, I met some of the most famous people, some of those very wealthy people when I went over there on a business trip. So the only thing I want to do right now, I'd like to finally open my barbecue restaurant, because all the stuff I've learned, the best barbecue, I've had all the business plan for it. Before I close my eye, I'm asking God to grant me that one wish. I want to reopen a good barbecue restaurant. That's the one thing I want to do. I have the technology and everything else to do it. I just want to one more time before I go. And then I can go. When I was in at Pine Lake, when I separated from my second wife, I was there for like 4 years. I felt truly happy and at peace with myself at that time. I still do. And most times I do, because when you traverse adversarial things in your life, it causes you're at peace with yourself, because you're secure in the knowledge where you are, where you're going to go, and you got to realize that if you wake up tomorrow morning and you lost your sight, your wealth, your family, or this, or you lost everything else, you are still alive, and there is something there for you. It doesn't matter. I've seen people who were dying and spent years in suffering, but you know what? You still go. You're not here forever. You're going to come in, and no matter how painful or miserable life is, there's light at the end of the tunnel. You're going to leave this body, and all the pain and suffering that you have, it's just physical. The soul cannot heat. The soul doesn't feel heat or cold or flame or loss or pity or nothing. Your soul is neutral. The body feels pain, all kinds of stuff. But you, the person that is Jason, or you, Mr. Eric, would not feel any pain. The entity that is Eric and the entity that is Jason cannot feel pain. It's through this body you're going to experience pain and loss and suffering. But when you become to go back with your maker where you came from, because you actually come from someplace and you actually go to someplace, there is no pain, there is no suffering. It's a different dimension. But we will all get there, and you will find out when that time comes. No question about it. Well, the way I look at business, when I came to the United States, or even before I left home, when I was married to my wife in Trinidad, my first, that's Tasha's mom, I used to collect copper wire, right? So I had my regular job. I always tried to do something else on the side to make an extra buck. So I used to collect copper wire. You burn it and take all the plastic off of it. And I used to buy it from the little guys out there next to the landfill station. I buy it from them, burn it up. And when I get like 100 pounds, take it down to Port of Spain and sell it. I used to make like about 100% profit. So I used to have a little business on the side. That was the first little business I had. When I came into the United States, again, as I said previously, I used to work for I went to study traffic management. And the very first business I bought a 40 Econoline van. Every vehicle I've ever bought thereafter is either the vehicle had to make money, or else I wasn't buying no vehicle that just to drive. I bought a Econoline van, it made money. So I used to transport packages from Woburn and a couple other places into Logan Airport. And that's how I started my first trucking business. The most rewarding, when I worked for David Porcaro, Mr. Porcaro Sr. You had senior, junior, and then you had a junior. But Senior Porcaro was Sicilian. They were from Sicily. And he used to put my hands against and say, see, Tony, we're brothers. See, we're the same complexion. And we're pretty much almost the same, because we were Sicilian. We're almost the same complexion. But I did such a good job over there that they used to say, listen, he used to joke to Kennedy. He said, listen, the telephone company, don't pay the phone company, but make sure Mr. Wallen gets his check at the end of the week. He needs that money, but anybody else forget it. We won't pay anybody, we'll pay you. Because I did such a great job for him. It was very rewarding to do a good job for him. And as a business, and that's how I started my trucking business. And that's I got in after. Then my other most successful part of the trucking business was working for Johnny's Food Master in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Johnny Jesus Food Master. He was a Portuguese groceries chain store, and I used to take care of all those Portuguese people on his street. And it was one of the most rewarding things I ever did, because to have these women, we had one particular woman, she was Greek. She was about 80 years old. She used to buy one bag of grocery a week. But she used to give me a $5 tip back in those days. And I used to have to hug, she used to have to hug her and give her a kiss and hold her. That's all she wanted. I guess that's all she wanted. So somebody to talk to and give her a hug and give her a kiss and see. And people along that area used to leave their doors open for me. We never lost a single package, and people before me used to lose the people's packages. They get their food, half their bread, a loaf was eaten, their Pepsi was the 2 liter bottle. They just get it half, they just drink half. Never lost nothing, never lost. And when I left that, he did not want me to leave that job because I got a good job with Emory Effort. It was a nice gig, you know. I made good money with that. Two of the guys that worked with me went on to carry down that job. These guys, they come from New York, and they're staying in my house. They're engineers. And one of the guys, he's been an engineer for umpteen years now. He lives right in Tennessee, just moved to Tennessee from living all these years. And these are guys that live in my house, they were engineers. So all these things came out of this one little job. I mean, there was many stories like that, but that was one. The other thing I loved was I love construction. But and it's not so much I got into construction by default. I wanted to build a house, and I built a house in New Hampshire. I went from dug well to septic system, foundation, framing, did the whole thing. And I never did it before. And I did it all in my lunchtime. I work for FedEx, and every lunchtime I'll meet somebody in the boondocks and ask them, how you get so and so and so? They'll tell me I go back home and I figure it out. The highlights of that place was to do the septic system, and it was costing me $20,000 to do it because you had to make a big mound in the back of the house. And I was telling a guy on a construction site, and the guy said, I'm gonna give you a guy's number, call him. So this, up there in that part of the world was the French Canadians and the people that were like the Mexicans down here in the construction business, people that came from Montreal and Quebec, Canada. Took me to his partner, he's an engineer. The guy came and his wife came. They did some measurements. He told me, I'll call you back tomorrow. Called me back with a little plan. And he says, you're going to move the house back about 20 feet back from where it's going to be. He drew it out. And he said, you're going to put the septic system in front. I had a walkout basement. I had more front yard. And I got my well, my septic system for $2,500. So from 20,000, and you got your well septic system, which is like $40,000 I saved. So I did that. I cut my teeth on construction, 2x6 construction, energy efficient, all that good stuff, Keckle oven stove. I learned that, cut my teeth in New Hampshire on that. Fast forward to Georgia, I came to Georgia, and when I divorced my third wife, again, things open my door. When your mind is clear, it opens doors for you. So I decided just to occupy myself. Well, I got my second wife. I was looking to do a restaurant, and I designed a little building. I built another restaurant in front. For one of the guys that worked with me and helped me out, I built him a 3-story house, 3 times the size of my house. I built it for my partner because he did a good job. Designed a restaurant. It was one of the best restaurants in the city of Pine Lake. It caused the city of Pine Lake to raise the value of the homes by $10,000 when it was done. Yeah, I still have the record of raising the city of Pine Lake. To this the restaurant is not operating right now. They asked me, would you come back and please open the restaurant, because you're the only span that made the town come alive. Because when you were there, the whole front, the business district was improved, and ever since you left, it's never been the same. And I'm this little black guy in this ultra white. It's like Pine Lake. I had these guys eating out of my. They used to call me the mayor of Pine Lake because whatever I wanted, I got it. the roti place on Pine Lake. But before that, I had a restaurant. My next door neighbor, we had Big Daddy's restaurant on Memorial Drive. That's how I got into the barbecue business. He taught me barbecue, how to smoke meat. And I learned, we were having the Olympics in 1996. And we used to burn all the ribs in the front of the building, and I had to figure out some way not to burn ribs. And I went and did the research, and we got GNR barbecue. We got an old GNR barbecue grill, and that's when I learned to work on real smokers, and we were able to not burn ribs ever anymore. Never burned ribs ever since. And I used to watch them make sauce. I never learned to make, and I taught myself to make sauces. I now make some of the best barbecue sauces in the country. Synergy Restaurant Consultants, who are the biggest restaurant people in the country. I was doing my restaurant in New York. They did all the plan because I make very good barbecue sauce. The smoothies I make the very best, smoked meat the very best. But I was doing, we're trying to raise money to do it to do a franchise. So I have all the plans for it to do a franchise. And it's all, but to do one of the best barbecue restaurants will be in New York. If it's built today in New York, it'd be better than anything that New York has to offer. And New York has some very famous, good restaurants in New York for barbecue. It's now like the third big barbecue mecca now in the country. Most people don't know that. New York is ranked as one of the best now. So I was going to be ranked as one of the best. So as far as barbecue, I know one of the things we wanted to do is to make a drink. So we had good drinks, good barbecue sauces, and a restaurant. And we started a business, and we did the plans for all that. But the lowest hanging fruit was making the drinks. So I now made my famous mango drink. It's now shelf stable for 2 years, 2-year shelf life. I took it to China. It's one of the best mango drinks they ever had in China. It's rated one of the best mango drinks anywhere. It has only 4 basic ingredients. And from that, we're going to make 5 or 6 more drinks. That took me to China. It took me to Costa Rica. It took me all over the place with that. And that was on that drink. I've done a lot of other business deals as a result of that, and all kinds of stuff I got involved in. One of the greatest success other than doing barbecue, is my mango drink. Now, the mango drink started, I had an argument with my second wife about my daughter. And I think she didn't want me to, she got a message and didn't deliver it. Whatever it was very, very upsetting to me, and she hurt me very bad. And I didn't eat for like 3 days. And I'm a great lover of mangoes. So I went to the farmer's market, the Cobb Farmer's Market in Decatur. And when I went there, at that time, mangoes are out for the season, so there was no more mangoes. And I used to go to the Indian store. I went there to get something else, and they had mangoes and pure mango drink in cans. And I bought a can, and I came back home, and I blended it with evaporated milk, some bitters, and put it in the fridge. I took 1 drink out of it, and I left it there. My other partner who was living, one of the friends of mine who was staying with me, he took it and he drank it. He said, "Tony, that was really good. What was that?" I said, "I just made a mango drink." Next thing you know, I made another one, and that's how the mango drink started. But it started where I was mad because of Tasha, and because I love my children so much, and she really was very, very wrong, and because I love my kids so much that I didn't eat for like 3 days. I was so mad. And that's how the mango drink came about. That drink, the mango drink, I made it in the restaurant at the Rody Place on Pine Lake. People used to come from New York to buy that to take back with them to New York. It was that good. And it still is. And that's how the mango drink started. I got a lot of offers. I went to China. They took it to China, but it didn't get for the 2008 Olympics. But it was spoiled on the way because it was too long to get there. I didn't know how to make it shelf stable. So fast forward, when I cut out all businesses after I shut down shop. I went back, didn't want to go into business ever again. And when I got married, I was at the church. And I said the women were praying for jobs, and I said, "Why don't you just pray for jobs, create jobs? If you pray to God, God will answer any prayer you have. So in that case, pray to make jobs." So we started a business, and we went ahead and raised some capital, and we were going to launch 3 businesses: a drink business, a barbecue sauce business, and a barbecue restaurant. We paid $30,000 to have the business plan drawn up, because I could do barbecue, I don't know how to package the whole thing. And I wanted people who were going to invest their money. I wanted to make sure it was professionally done and all the whistles and bells. So we hired Synergy Restaurant Consultants out of California. They came out and they did the business plan. At that time, they told me that the barbecue sauces I was making, because they travel around the globe, and they said this was one of the best they ever had, the barbecue sauces. And you'll get to taste them in a little while upstairs. One of them, at least. And then we settled on, we're going to launch 3 businesses. And we said, if we launch the barbecue drinks, the barbecue sauces and the drinks, and launch the restaurant last, you have like a 3-leg, because restaurants is a very volatile industry. So if you have the drinks is stable, barbecue sauce is stable. So if you had those 2 up and running and you open the restaurant last, but you can keep going on it. So we did the drink, and cut a long story short, I ended up going to Canada, and Canada was the only place that could actually make the drinks for me the way we wanted, with the sea moss and flaxseed and mango, because we took out the milk to make it shelf stable. So it's shelf stable for 2 years. It's a highly nutritional drink. It's all kind of health benefits to go with it. And that's how the mango drink was born. The original mango drink you have here today is the one with evaporated milk. It contains milk. She likes it better than the other one. Which tastes just as great. You will also get to taste some when you go upstairs. I got a little bit just in case. So you get to taste my creation. So we're able now, that drink now has taken me all over the places in supermarkets, now in New York. And I took it to China. Last year I went to China. I stayed in China in a month because of that drink. That drink has gone to Trinidad, it's gone California, it's gone all over the place. So we're starting to launch now. The drink is to employ the women at the church to get a residual income so that when they retire, because most of them were domestic workers, and caregivers. So most of them, when the job is over, they would have no money left, or there's nothing to go back. They get kicked out of the country, or somebody like Trump comes along and kick them out. They have nothing. This now, by the end of this year, we'll be up and running real full well. They can probably get about a $25,000 a year residual income from the little $5,000 investment that they made. That's only on the drinks. Then we still got the sauces to go and the restaurant to go. So that was one of the things I did, and that's an ongoing effort right now. Integrity, honesty, just be passionate about what you're doing. If you want to be a singer, sing to the trees, sing to the forest, sing to the guy who is driving a cart, sing to the homeless people. Just keep on singing. Passion is the energy that drives business. People don't do business to make money. They do business because they enjoy what they're doing. Bill Gates will tell you that. Microsoft, Mike, anybody that's in business will tell you. You just do it because you're passionate about it. The money will come, the manifest itself. But once you're passionate about something, money comes in. Like what you're doing, you kind of like your photography, you want to do this. So you're going to take a lot of pictures here and there, and you're going to go in places, and it's going to take you to places. Because what you're doing here, somebody might invite you, say, look, we just love you guys. We just trust you guys to do it. It's not that you guys are the best photographers in the world, or maybe the best this, but people just like who you are and who you are, your integrity, your attention to your craft, and you'll get called out to Texas, Rome, Paris. You get a gig, and then Beyonce says, listen, I want you to do a documentary. Follow me every day for the next 10 days. And all of a sudden now, you're doing $100,000 gig because somebody, but it's going to come with a lot of failures. Be prepared, because like I say, the road to success is paved with failures. If you didn't fail, you cannot succeed. Anybody that goes into business and they're successful the first day, you're doomed to failure, because the day something goes wrong, you want to commit suicide. But the humble way, you'll go here, you would go there, and you work at it, you work at it, you work at it. And I've been at it for years. 4 years I've been on this project, the drinks project, 4 years now. And we're hoping to do the restaurant, but you learn things along the way. I practiced my craft for 20 years. I've been smoking meat for 20 years. And I learned, I smoke meat in Tobago. I smoke meat where there's no smoker. I make my own smoke out of the dirt, out of banana leaves, I make a smoke out of all kinds of stuff, because you know what you're doing. Before you were born, you existed. Okay? And you're reading the Bible, and all the holy books says the same thing, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, Talmud, or whatever. It says, this camera you're looking at existed before it was. It was in somebody's mind. They conceptualized it. They put it on a drawing board. They made a model, and they make production, and voila, you have a Canon camera. So let us reverse engineer the camera. So we got the camera, we went to the drawing board. From the drawing board, we went to your mind. But before it was in your mind, it was someplace else. It's called infinite intelligence. And there's a saying in the Bible, there is nothing new under the sun. And that's a fact. Whatever, when you speak something, you actually speak something into existence. It's a vibration. And vibrations are recorded for infinity. So everything we've said and done right here is recorded somewhere. It might not be in that medium, but little by little, we're getting in some places now where things are being recorded. I mean, now you can speak to a little device and talk to somebody clear across the globe, and there's no wires connecting you, nothing. You will discover the secret. And when you die, you usually discover those things. So you were someplace before. The word Jason and Eric was someplace before. You came into this world. You will exit this world. But you don't, they said the human remains of Eric, here's his human remains. It's still your body. And they will say it's yours. They don't say, well, they say, well, he died, but that's your body. This is you. And what we're doing here, we're keeping a sort of a living memory. But there is evidence to show that you have captured what you are. So all the things we're doing here today, all the things I set out to do, I'm happy with some. I make good rotis. Didn't know what to make. I learned to make that drink. I do it on the fly. So most of the things, because you have a desire to do business, so a business. So you learn. That's how you say, well, let's go into the camera business. And you might say, you may start off with camera, but you could probably end up 2 years from now, I see Eric and Jason in a car wash. And I say, Eric, how did you go from camera to car wash? That's the way the world works. I was in the trucking business. I'm in the barbecue business, the drinks business. I'm in international business I'm connecting dots, connecting people, because when you travel, you meet people. And the most important thing you could do is meeting people and developing relationships with people. It's much more important than money. Because now I'm putting a couple deals together, not because I'm the smartest guy in the world, because the person on that side of the globe or this side, I put them together and they said to me, well, we'll give you half of this or quarter or whatever. You know a lot of stuff about New York. I said, I asked you about New York, what so and so. And what you may think is unimportant. It's like, I have this every day. Some guy said, my God, can you get that? Can you do this? And all of a sudden that person is so important. And for you, it was just nothing. I mean, I sell myself short every single day. I do stuff for people that is worth millions, but I never ask them for nothing. I never ask them for the business. You want to give me something, give me fine. I don't. We're in a position right now where I had to restart. Like I said, I've reinvented myself all through my life. You lost everything, you win, you lose, you win, you lose. I've lost fortunes, made fortunes. I lost about 3 or 4 fortunes in life. You had it all and then lost it all. Had it all, lost it all. Had it all, lost it all. It's life. But I thank God I'm sane. I'm not crazy. I thank God I'm not bitter at anybody. I'm not mad at nobody, because anytime you're mad at people, the only person you hurt is you, not them. So if you have your wife and she's unfaithful and you're pissed off, you know what? It ain't for you. You had a job, the boss pissed you off, you lose it, you know what? Yeah. I'm not saying you shouldn't be sad or shouldn't be glad, but life, you're going to come in and you're going to exit. You're going to take not a single thing with you. Not your fame, not your fortune, not your wife, your kids. That nice wife you had, so beautiful. She's underneath another person there after a while. So, Jason is gone. I got to try something else. She's not going to jump in the cemetery. The Egyptians used to do that. They kill servants, because they have servants in the afterlife, but we've come a long way since the Egyptians. Andrew Bocelli, it inspires me. Muhammad Ali, Lobsang Rampa, board game, drafts. It's called checkers. The Bhagavad Gita, sugar cake, brown. Oatmeal raisin cookies, my favorite. my mango drink. I love mangoes. Soursop from Trinidad. I would have to say the magnolia, mango, Christmas, jasmine rice, Sydney Poitier, Hidden Figures, the Roti Place on Pine Lake put me on the map. The Prayer by Andrew Butcher. HGTV, Fixer Upper. My most favorite show, Fixer Upper.